Hey guys, so Dragon Ball Legends has recently put out a new season of Battle Royale. By the time this video goes up, this is actually probably over at this point. But this was a special season because they were actually testing a change to the battle system, which they mentioned in the news that they were actually considering implementing into the full game. And this was sort of a Battle Royale testing season to make sure whether or not, well, I guess just to confirm whether or not people are either on board with this, how well the change actually functions, and just as a general way to gauge interest and see the effectiveness of this change. Now, what the change actually is, if we scroll down a little bit here, I have a screenshot, greatly reduces ki and vanishing gauge when moving backwards. And then mentioned in the news, I did actually do a separate video talking about this. The goal of this change is to reduce the over presence of passive gameplay, passive play styles. And the reason why that's so prevalent, the reason why it's been prevalent since basically the game was introduced, is because the battle system promotes that. People are going to be experiencing higher win rates by playing passively. People are going to be experiencing easier god ranks, higher win rates, and better rewards for playing passively. So obviously, naturally, the better players in the game are going to be, you know, exhibiting this sort of gameplay style. And at this point, it's been a thing in the game for years and years and years. And they've tried different ways to get rid of passive play styles. They've implemented the tackle mechanic. They've buffed the tackle mechanic many times. They have implemented the quick dash mechanic. They've implemented the quick attack mechanic. They have made a lot of different other changes that would, in their hope, promote proactive or aggressive playstyles, and there has not been a single solution to this problem, and this problem has existed since the game basically since beta of this game. Passive playstyles have been superior, and they have not yet figured out a way to, I guess, make proactive playstyles on par with passive playstyles. So this is one solution they've come up with. And I have come to the conclusion after playing the full 20 matches that we are allotted to test this. I would have liked to have tested this more. I would have liked to have tested this with different teams, different characters, but for whatever reason, they felt it was necessary to create this Battle Royale mode as a battleground sort of area to test out different changes and limit to how many times you can actually play and participate in this mode, which is mind-bogglingly dumb to me. I don't know why. If you're going to create like a sandbox mode like this to at least have people test things out, it's like essentially like a PTR, like a public test realm is what this mode is. Imagine if you were testing a game. Imagine for Dragon Ball Project Multi, right? The beta just ended. Imagine for Dragon Ball Project Multi, you could only play 3 matches per day and test the game out 3 times per day, right? That would be the dumbest thing ever. That's essentially what this is. They're limiting the amount of times we can actually test this change in this mode because of how the mode is structured. Makes absolutely zero sense. There's super counterintuitive to what it's trying to accomplish. But anyway, I actually don't like this change. And I'll give 2 reasons why I don't like this change. I am completely in favor of trying to create a way to incentivize more proactive play. I am somebody that has been saying this for years. But here are the 2 reasons why I don't like this change here. This change specifically, I feel that it severely limits what you can do, right? When you're reducing the character's ki and vanishing gauge moving backwards, to be honest with you guys, I don't have an issue with them reducing ki for moving backwards. I don't think that's that big of an issue, but vanish? You basically can't play the game if you move back at all, right? There's a reduction in the amount of options and decisions that you can make at any given moment with this change being in the game, right? The way it is right now, if you're in melee range, for example, you have the option to attack, you have the option to vanish step, sidestep, or you have the option to back up. Essentially, with this in the game, you can back up, but you're basically at a huge disadvantage because you can't react in time to what your opponent's going to be doing. And that's, I think, essentially what almost eliminates that from being an option. It essentially is no different than backdashing, which I would argue right now, backdashing has 0 merit at any point in any match. The only time where I could really see backdashing of any sort of value is if you know your opponent's going to overtap and you backdash away from the tap to allow them to overtap, but it's not a thing that happens in like actual like decently competitive PvP. The only time where backdash really can be useful is to backdash out of an AoE green card. If you like see it happening ahead of time, that's it. That's the only functional advantage you can get from using backdash. Other than that, backdash is like one of the worst things you could do in a match because it leaves you exposed for the time where your character is in the middle of the animation. And that's essentially now what backfloating is going to be if they continue with this change here. You're essentially just exposed when you're backfloating because you lose your vanish. So if the opponent goes for a tackle and then you go for a strike to counter their tackle and then they vanish out of the strike card, you're exposed. You're going to get comboed for free because you have no vanish gauge. So I think it really does limit the amount of decisions you have when playing the game, which I'm not in favor of. And then the second point, which I think is actually probably more prominent and more of an issue than the first point, which I just talked about, is I don't actually think this change addresses the issue itself, right? They stated the goal of this change was to incentivize people to play more proactively and disincentivize people to play passively. So it's doing both those things. Proactive playstyle becomes more pushed, but they're not pushing proactive playstyle in a proactive way. See what I'm saying? They're not buffing you for initiating. They're nerfing you for playing passively. So they're, I guess technically speaking, they're not incentivizing you to play proactively. They're disincentivizing you to play passively. And I don't even feel that this change really addresses the major problem. Rather, it's more of like a pseudo fix to the problem, since it's not it's trying to prevent the problem from occurring instead of simply removing the problem, right? The main problem is passive play, and the main way passive play occurs is when you are at long range, full screen, right? There's three different ranges in this game. There's melee range, there's mid range, and there's full screen, aka long range. Passive play is 99% of the time occurring at long range. So instead of either changing the way that long range works in the game, instead of tweaking that in some way, instead of making adjustments to the actual long range function of the battle system, they are trying to prevent you from getting there in the first place. So to me, this kind of seems like almost a lazy way to do this, because they're disincentivizing you to even get to long range without actually addressing the problem, which is long range itself. So those are the two things that I feel really misses the mark with this change here. And I think it's probably a pretty good idea here to do a discussion video about this. So I made a topic here on X or Twitter saying to comment down below with what you think of the change that they're currently testing in LBR. Again, it's probably over by now, but what do you think of the overall passive nature of PvP? And do you think something needs to change? I do think something needs to change, and I have been vocal about this for years. I was vocal about this when they implemented the quick attack and quick dash feature. You can go back to everything is documented on this channel. You can go back and look at my reaction to when they first announced the quick attack and quick dash functions were being introduced to the game. I thought it was a very good change. I think the idea was very good. I think the execution was horrible. I don't think quick dash and I don't think quick attack function the way they should. And I think the additions of those functions in this game at this point, we've had 2 years to test them. They came out right after the 4th anniversary. I think they are a complete and utter failure. I don't think they need to exist in the game, and I think they accomplish almost nothing. Quick attacks and quick dashes don't mean anything. Tackle was also something that was introduced. This was like right after the 1st anniversary as a way to not only incentivize proactive playstyles, but also just simply to give another function to the battle system, because the battle system was kind of bland before tackles were introduced. Right? You had before tackles were introduced, you would tap the screen at mid-range and your character would tap blast from mid-range. It was kind of strange. I think tackles were definitely a good thing to the game, and I think they've actually added a lot to the game since their introduction, because they've tweaked the system many times. They haven't really tweaked quick dashes and quick attacks. They've tweaked the damage numbers like once or twice, but they haven't really tweaked the functionality of the actual move itself. So I think that's probably a bit strange. Again, tackles they have tweaked here and there. So yeah, I do think something needs to change, but I think they're missing the mark when it comes to what exactly needs to change. So I'm going to go through some of the comments here. A lot of you guys know what my stance is on this, and a lot of you guys know what I would specifically change about the battle system, but we'll go through the comments and I'll give my thoughts as we read through some of these. Hopefully some people have the same ideas and mindset that I have here. All right, so first comment is from Billy. Let's open this because it looks like he's quoting himself here. All right, let's see what he says. So how about instead of vanish and cure removal on backfloat, we just completely remove the ability to perfect vanish at long range? Okay, so this is sort of getting into what I've been talking about recently. And not even just recently, just forever. I feel like I was talking about removing Perfect Vanish since like the second anniversary. I think I've been talking about this Perfect Vanish. I think that most of the game, once you get to a certain level, and it's not like this game takes some extraordinary level of skill. It's not like once you get to be in the god ranks, like it really doesn't take that much skill. But in god rank, in my experience, I've been god ranked 65 times. I've been doing this for a long time. When you're playing against a good player, the number one thing that influences the outcome of every single fight is how many times do you get perfect vanished and how many times do you perfect vanish the opponent. And I mentioned this in the last video I did discussing this. I think if there was a way to see certain data points associated with each player, and you went into the PvP rankings and you took a look at the top, I don't know, 50, 100, 500 players that were ranked in PvP, and you looked at, and you had the ability to look at what was the percent chance each of those people had to get PV'd per match. I think there is a direct correlation between that percentage number and how highly ranked they're going to be in PvP. The lower the percentage of you getting perfect vanished, the higher you're going to be ranked. And so the way people tailor their gameplay, the way people tailor their play styles in this game, if you want to be good at this game and you want to rank highly and you want to win, and you want to improve your win percentage, you want to improve your win rate, you want to get rewards, the best way to do that is to be conscious of how to not get perfect vanished by your opponent. It's not even that you want to be perfect vanishing your opponent, it's how you avoid getting perfect vanished by your opponent. And to me, that is the number one thing to be aware of at all times. I think it is even more important than the Rising Rush mechanic. The perfect vanish mechanic is the number one influencer in who wins and who loses matches in this game. I really do believe that after 65 god ranks, after playing this game for 6 years, I think perfect vanish is the number one biggest influential mechanic in determining who wins and loses in this game. And for a mechanic that is as passive promoting as it is, that is the main culprit, in my opinion, of why passive playstyles have been dominant since the game was launched, essentially. Since day one. That is my opinion. That's the incentive of playing... Now, to get back to Billy's comment here. That's the incentive of playing at full screen. You can't counterplay a perfect vanish, and there's no risk just floating at long range at the moment. Yeah, so I mean, there's two ways to look at this sentence. You can't counterplay a perfect vanish. That is true. Once you get perfect vanish, you cannot counter that. Like in very niche situations, you actually can. Like, for example, if somebody perfect vanishes you off of you doing a blast card, and then you chain into a strike and they go for a blast, and you have blast armor, this is mostly true. However, you can counter getting perfect vanished by playing around your opponent being able to do that to you. And what do I mean by that? If you go to any video that I've uploaded of me playing PvP, of me playing this game, I mean, I would probably recommend going to a god rank video, because I think the highest quality matches are in those god rank grind videos, playing against the better, more skilled players and that know what they're doing more often than not. You'll notice that essentially when we're playing in neutral, which means nobody has priority on the other player, the only time either player, if their other player is good, is clicking any kind of arts card is when the other person is in the middle of doing something. And the reason why that is because you cannot perfect vanish the opponent when you're in the middle of an action. So if the opponent, you'll see this all the time. I'm constantly conscious of this every time I'm playing the game, and that is the reason why, again, I think this is the most influential thing in this game right now, and always has been. If you watch any of my videos and you see me at long range, I will really only be pressing cards when my opponent is either sidestepping or pressing their own blast card or going for a strike cancel, because I know that they can't perfect vanish me if I click a card when they're in the middle of doing something. That's the reason. The entire passive playstyle, this is the most important thing I'm going to say in this video, I think. The entire passive playstyle is not because the person is fishing, more often than not, is not because the person is fishing for perfect vanishes. It's because they're playing around them getting perfect vanish by the opponent. That is the reason why passive playstyles exist, and that is the reason why they're so prevalent. Because you have to play around perfect vanish, because it is the most influential metric in a game that decides whether you win or lose. If you get perfect vanished, you get comboed and destroyed. Because think about it. Perfect vanishes lead to combos. Combos lead to rising rushes. Rising rushes lead to you killing your opponent. Then you can sort of combo killing your opponent into other mechanics. Maybe you have characters that get stronger when the opponent has less characters. Maybe you have characters like Broly who really get stronger when the opponent has less characters. But it all stems from perfect vanishes. If you can get perfect vanished, you can very easily lose the game no matter what your situation is. So I think most I'll reiterate. I think most 90 to 95 to 100% of passive playstyles by good players in this game, they are enacting those passive playstyles not because they're fishing for perfect vanishes. I think that's very seldom the case. I think it's a pretty big misconception, I think, actually, by most of the people who play this game is, oh, people are passive because they're fishing for perfect vanishes. No, it's actually the opposite of that. People are playing passively because they're trying to avoid getting perfect vanished. And you have to do that because you'll lose if you don't. So, the only time PV should ever be functioning is at close to mid-range. Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know how they would change the battle system, but I think I'm just saying I think something needs to be done about perfect vanish, because that to me is the culprit behind passive playstyles. It's perfect vanish. It has to be. They've changed so much about the battle system since day one of this game. This game is not the same game it was when it came out 6 years ago. But guess what was in the game day one? Perfect vanish. Guess what's been the dominant playstyle since day one? Passive playstyles. There's a correlation here, right? I mean, it's not... After 6 years, you think they'd understand, but I guess not. I don't think reducing vanish just by moving backwards is the right play. Reducing ki isn't a bad idea. Yeah, I'm less... I don't think... maybe reducing some ki on backfloating is that bad. It's fine. It's the vanish that's egregious to me. If we are really stuck on vanish removal for backfloating, not a good idea, then at least make it occur only when floating from mid to long range. Yeah, reducing... I mean, you guys can even see this. I did a video in this LBR mode. There was a play where I knew my opponent was going to rising rush. I knew it. And so what did I do? I backed up from mid-range to I backed up from melee range to mid-range because I knew he was gonna rush. And so me backing up from melee range to mid-range because I read that my opponent was going to rising rush, which is I would consider that to be a good play. If you know your opponent is going to take some action and then you deliberately take an action to counter your opponent's action, that to me is a form of skill, and I don't believe you should be punished for something like that. And so what happened was I backed up from melee to mid-range, I lost my vanish, and my opponent essentially rushed from mid-range and hit me with it because I had no vanish. So I don't think something like that should be punished. The idea is to show a benefit of playing mid to close range and create a punishment at long range play. This will force people to play at close to mid-range to utilize tackle and arts cards more to initiate. Please feel free to provide your own. But yeah, so I don't disagree with the premise behind this post at all. I think I'm mostly in agreement with what Billy is saying here. Okay, let's move on. From what is seen in current LBR, it's egregious how punished you are to try and maintain some distance, especially for blast units, but the concept they're implementing is at least the correct course. Striking a balance between the current LBR and current PvP will take months. Yeah, I could see that. I think I even made a post about this, about the way that I think they should change the battle system. Here it is. So this is something I thought of in, I don't know, 5 minutes, right? So here's what my idea would be for how they could change the battle system. So there would be sort of like this 2-layered battle system change. Layer 1, you would hold a PvP season where you simply just remove perfect vanishes from the game without changing anything else. And so that change in a vacuum would be what is being tested during the PvP season, right? So you just test it. What does PvP look like before perfect vanish is removed? So AKA the current system. And what does it look like once perfect vanish is removed? Now, clearly, I don't think simply removing perfect vanish is going to be the end-all be-all outcome of this change, right? Perfect vanish is, at this point, it's way too entrenched in the battle system. It's way too entrenched in everyone's playstyles. I think it's probably too important simply just to remove it and then be done with it. There are going to be good and bad things that come out of removing perfect vanish. So I think just testing, one PvP season, 2 weeks, what is good about removing perfect vanish, and then what is bad, about removing perfect vanish. And then after the season is over and they have had time to analyze the data of the change, they would focus on the bad side effects of removing perfect vanish, and then they just simply keep adjusting the battle system until they get to a system that they feel comfortable with. But I think the culprit is perfect vanish. And I even say here, I don't think simply removing perfect vanish will be enough. There are going to be good and bad effects that pop up as a result of it being removed. So I think they would need to hold an entire season to collect data on the change, which I think that's a pretty reasonable approach to this. I don't think they've ever done 2 PvP seasons in a row of just simply testing battle system changes. But I think that's probably what they should do. I mean, if it's a change as big as this would be, because again, perfect vanish is just that entrenched in the battle system, and it's just that entrenched in the basis of this game at this point. This would probably be the biggest change this game has ever seen if they actually did do this, but that would require a lot of testing and data collection, which I'm not sure if they're willing to do. I think we need a DK64 stream to verify how good or bad this Legends change is. Yeah, Donkey Kong. I mean, I do want to play this. It's just you gotta block out like 3 days. My biggest issue with the control of the game forever has always been how worthless backdash is. Yeah, we talked about backdashing. I think this is an interesting step in making it more useful since you don't lose vanish, but it needs to be faster or something. It's almost never the correct option. Yeah, I don't think them making back floating less of an option all of a sudden just gives backdashing more value. I think they're just, it's not like removing back floating is going to make backdashing more of an attractive option. I think at that point they would both just be bad options, right? It's not like a give and take situation here. Just an FYI, this has already been implemented in PvE, so it's not just on BR. No, that is wrong. In PvE, if you back float from melee to mid-range and mid-range to long-range, you don't lose ki and vanish. There should be an X amount of distance you have to float back before losing ki and vanish engage, so you can have enough time to float back and vanish or rush. I've gotten caught like that a few times, but I get what they're trying to do. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I just explained, the situation with me trying to back float out of a Rising Rush from melee range. Honestly, I'd rather remove the Rising Rush or at least lower the amount of damage during PvP. It's an easy KO, even if you're the opposing element. They're never going to do this. This is kind of like, I don't even know what to call this. This is like the Legends players' deepest, darkest desires is like just to remove Rising Rush from the game. It's never going to happen. There are too many characters at this point that have direct functions with Rising Rush. And so they would have to actually adjust a lot of characters' kits to make up for the removal of that mechanic. And I also think Rising Rush at this point is also a mechanic that's just so entrenched in the battle system of the game. And every character is essentially balanced around Rising Rush being used in every fight, because if they remove Rising Rush, if we have matches right now that are going to timer with Rising Rush being in the game, imagine if it wasn't in the game. Right? Every match would go to timer without Rising Rush. Not actually every match, but a lot of matches would go to timer without it, and I think people would probably be pretty bored. We got a pretty long one here. Let's open this up here. I want to make sure we give Adam a fair shake. Okay. This LBR is a good test, as them testing things is amazing. I'm all up for it, but they did overdo it a bit too much. In my opinion, it would have been better if they just removed PV completely, or if they removed long range and only had mid and close range. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talking about maybe separating what happens between mid and long range. Like maybe you can do different things between mid and, which technically speaking, it already exists, right? You can't tackle from long range, but you can tackle from mid range, stuff like that. So there already are differentiating factors between what you can do from mid and long range. So maybe you can't perfect vanish at mid range, or maybe you can't do it from long range. I mean, that's a possibility for sure. For PvP, the passive nature needs to stop, as so many players are just playing the waiting game, sitting at long range and trying to fish for... Yeah, so again, this is what I see most people saying. I'm not trying to call out Adam here. I'm just pointing this out because this is a very, very common misconception. And there are certainly people who do this, right? Sitting at long range and trying to fish for constant PVs. This, to me, is more of a misconception than a reality, at least from the perspective of good players. Again, I'll reiterate, passive playstyles, most good players are not implementing passive playstyles because they're trying to constantly fish for perfect vanishes. They are playing passively to reduce the chances that they are perfect vanished. That is why. It does get boring for those who are aggressive players and not passive players. Yes, I completely understand this, 100%. For the things that need to change that I want to see, Rising Rush being locked until one of your battle members has been defeated or locked for 80 timer counts. Yeah, that I think there actually was an attempt to test this in LBR mode at one point. If I remember correctly, I believe there was an LBR season where they actually did try and test Rising Rush being locked for like the first 60 counts or whatever it was. I believe that actually did happen. 180 timer counts to start a battle. You will unlock Rising Rush at 100 timer counts. Yeah, I mean that's not an unrealistic, thing to want. I think this is certainly more realistic than Rising Rush just simply being removed from the game. This change is needed as too many people get Rising Rush so fast, and it's like fusing Super Vegeta being in the game means it's basically a guaranteed KO. And his Dragon Ball Destruction immunity makes it so that he can easily farm another Rising Rush to spam it almost all the time. Yes, true. That is true. Yeah. I mean, I completely understand where this Adam's coming from, for sure. All right, let's go back here. Let me open this. Oof, that's a long one. Okay. Then testing is a good thing. Now I understand the backfloating and wanting to punish the pastness, but they missed the benchmark by gears. Should have been implemented during the OG Namek-Ku and his blue card. The overall passiveness are perfect vanishes. The first person gets that can win the game most likely. Yeah. I mean, this does fall in line with what I've been saying the entire video almost. Like, I think there is a direct correlation between the amount of times you are able to perfect vanish your opponent and how often you will win. And then the same thing goes for the reverse. The lower the percent chance of you getting perfect vanish per match, the higher your win percentage is going to be. The overall power creep in the mechanics of the game. Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta's green. You have to play and not play. One green card can mean death. Very few units can neutralize it. Defensive units are non-existent. Yeah, but that is something that is just a factor or a byproduct of power creep. I think points 2 and 3 in this comment are probably just directly connected with each other, right? The more power creep there is, the less defensive units that are going to exist, because units that are defensive are just going to be like they're no longer defensive when better offensive characters release. How I'd fix passiveness: remove perfect vanish, implement a mechanic that punishes standing still or floating left or right for a long time with no action. Remove Rising Rush or make it once only, and make newer units that can handle and deal with Rising Rush like Golden Freeze at TN, allowing you to actually combo after using a quick attack. And stop making newer units so damn broken. Implement actual counters for sealing cards, nullifying, no switching. Yeah, so I don't think they would do all of these things. To me, there needs to be a more controlled way of testing changes. So like, I don't think they would do a thing where like they implement all these things and then they like make changes based off of all of those things being implemented at the same time. I think what they would do is they would have to start, okay, let's see what the game would look like without perfect vanish, right? And then you would have a PvP season without perfect vanish, and then they'd analyze the data, and then maybe they go, okay, well, we didn't like removing perfect vanish. Let's have a season where you lose vanish for not performing an action for 5 counts, which is also something that I've, proposed as well. What if instead of you losing key and vanish for simply backfloating, you lose key and vanish for not performing an action after like 3 or 4 counts, right? So maybe they have a PvP season where they implement this, but I think they have to do this one by one so that they can have a controlled environment where these things can actually be tested and they can tell which one works and which one doesn't. But yeah, I think most people are on the same page here with this. Instead of greatly reducing key and vanish engage when moving backwards, they should just remove perfect vanishes. That would be a way better change. Yeah, okay, I think this is 36 likes, so yeah, I think most people are in general agreement with this. 1 of 6, huh? Okay. We'll take a look through this. Let me open this. All right, so appreciate their attempt, but this is not okay. Personally, I think backing up is fine because it gives you time to react to whatever the opponent does, hence reducing the RNG factor, and you have more control of what you're doing. Yeah, so I think this is actually a good point, right? They mentioned that, again, the main, I guess, the motivation behind this change is to attempt to curve passive playstyles. I don't think simply backing up from melee to mid-range to avoid things like rising rushes and stuff like that, in my opinion, that is not being passive. That's more so just being strategic. Like, if you're in a boxing match and you dodge someone's punch, you're not being passive. You're dodging the punch because you have to win. And you're being strategic because you know the punch is coming and you're dodging it. Right? You're not being passive. You're just doing what you need to do. So, this is actually... I agree. You can't back up infinitely anyway because they've addressed it with the OG Namekoku. Yeah, so he's talking about backfloating at long range. You actually do already... Like, this technically already exists in the game. It just happens at long range. Which was, it was implemented with the Namekoku. The real problem here, which heavily encourages passive playstyle, is none other than Perfect Vanish. Yes, I think this is true. The number one reason why people don't initiate is just because they are scared of getting... Yes! This person gets it. 100%. I'm liking this. I'm going to read this again. The number one reason why people don't initiate is because they are scared of getting Perfect Vanished. Thank you. Round of applause. And with meta units right now, you probably just lost the match because of the PV. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you get PV'd by Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. He's got double card draw speed. You can combo into a Mega who gets double card draw speed. Then you can combo into Baby who draws cards on entry. And then when you switch, he draws more cards. Like, yeah, things snowball very fast. They should have done something with the PV, not just the backing up. Yes, I agree. Because Perfect Vanishes, I think, more so address the passiveness problem anyway. Right? It's not just the act of backing up. In this LBR season, I've had a match where I YOLO Rising Rushed at close range and the opponent just got hit because they were in the middle of backing up. Yeah. That was so stupid to me. It's exactly one of the reasons why I said this change was not okay. Yeah. This guy's spitting. This guy's spitting. I agree. Why would I be punished when I predicted what the opponent was going to do and kept a safe distance in order to react to that? Yeah. I mean, same wavelength here. Hopefully, if they couldn't do much about the PV, at least they'd give us some kind of new mechanics to safely initiate a combo in the future battle system update. Please don't be a quick attack V2. Yeah, I am not the biggest fan of quick attack. And I guess this is something else we can bring up as well. The passive playstyle advantage, I guess the advantage that you have for playing passively, they've known about this forever. This has been common knowledge in this game for years. There's a reason they implemented tackles. There's a reason they buffed tackles multiple times. There's a reason they implemented the quick attack system, the quick dash system. And now there's a reason why they're testing this change. They have constantly tried to fix this problem of passive playstyles being too good. And they have never succeeded. Nothing they have done in 6 years has succeeded. So hopefully they hit the mark this time. I think what the real problem... let me see. This person might have made another... Yeah, I guess this person has two posts. I think what the real problem isn't drifting back to long range necessarily, but what I think is are people staying at long range. Yes, so yeah, I agree. So it's not the act of going to long range. It is once you are in long range, you just sitting there and not really initiating or doing anything. And again, I think the main reason of that is because of Perfect Vanish. But since one person can put both fighters at long range, I think that standing or drifting at long range for more than a few timer counts should slightly decrease both players' vanish and key until you perform an action. Yeah, again, this is also something that I have proposed multiple times, is if they're not going to touch the Perfect Vanish system, because as much as I'm talking about Perfect Vanish in this video, I will admit that would be by far the biggest change they've ever made to this game, is if they actually removed Perfect Vanish. There's probably going to be many unforeseen side effects of doing that. So if they are too hesitant to do that, I think this could be a good alternative, right? Instead of removing Perfect Vanish, maybe if you don't perform an action for 3 or 4 counts, maybe your character gets, I don't know, fatigued or whatever the term they want to use for it is. Maybe your character gets fatigued and you start losing vanish and start losing key. Maybe your cards start getting destroyed. I don't know, something to incentivize you to actually do something at long range. That could be something for sure. I agree. This person also has multiple posts here. A lot of strong opinions, which I definitely like, because this is a big problem in the game right now. Right idea, bad fix. I think a better change would be no key recovery while side floating or standing still. Huh. No key recovery while side floating or standing still. I think this, along with faster key recovery when charging to offset the overall loss of key, would encourage more aggressive, proactive play. That might be the first time I've heard this. That's not a horrible idea. No key recovery while side floating or standing still. I mean, again, it's hard to really imagine like all of the different effects this would have unless we tested it out. But this is the first time I've actually heard of this proposal before. My biggest problem with PvP is all the rock, paper, scissors, and coin flips. Yes, definitely annoying. I don't find this aspect of the game fun at all, and I quit because of it after 4+ years. Guessing / getting guessed should not be a determining factor in who wins. Yeah, so you're talking about Rising Rush. I would assume that most people who play the game do not like the Rising Rush mechanic. I think that is very fair to say. Probably multiple posts here as well. The best way to counter passive play is to nerf Perfect Vanish. Yes. Removal of Perfect Vanish will promote too aggressive gameplay. Okay. So I think they should nerf it in the following way. Every subsequent Perfect Vanish is weaker than the previous one. Permanent debuffs. In this way, opponent wouldn't be able to have multiple Perfect Vanish advantages. Third or fourth Perfect Vanish will become significantly weaker and won't impact the game as much as it does. But what does that mean, weaker? Right, because you're still Perfect Vanishing the opponent, right? They should nerf it. Like, he says every subsequent Perfect Vanish is weak. Like, in what way is it weaker? Like, you do less damage after you Perfect Vanish somebody? This could be interesting, right? Because, like I said, they might not be completely comfortable with just flat out removing the mechanic from the game. But if there's a way that they can mitigate this from being too strong, something like this could potentially work. So this is a way that they could explore that as well. But we would have to be more specific with, like, in what way is it weaker here? The issue of passive play stems from constantly keeping your distance and fishing for PBs. Yeah, again, I already made my statement about this. I think this is largely untrue, but there's definitely cases where it is true. But for the most part, when you're talking about good players, people are not just fishing for PVs the whole time, because it's very easily punishable, honestly. Like, when you're just sitting in the back and just, like, sidestepping constantly, like, it's very easily punishable. I think it's more so just people that are trying not to get PV'd themselves. Yeah, rather than the act of moving back itself to get different options. This punishes tactical plays. Yes, I agree. I think this is true. It does punish tactical plays and doesn't do enough against actually staying in the back. Yeah, I completely agree with this. I just don't agree with the fishing for PV thing. They need to do something along the lines of losing key and or vanish when you sit around float for too long without doing any kind of action. I don't know how it would work in practice, but it could be a good thing to test out. Yeah, so this is also now, I guess, kind of a common thing we're seeing as well. I have no issue with this. If they wanted to test that out, I'd be for that. Perfect Vanish is the main issue that caused people to be passive, and the LBR change wasn't good because it still had Perfect Vanish. Game is also made in a way right now where you kind of get rewarded for just not doing anything and waiting for your opponent to do something first. Yeah, but that's always been the case. Like, it's not just that's not an exclusive thing to right now. Like, that's always been, like, you're always in a much better position when you do nothing. Right? You guys have heard me say a lot of times I say it in jest, but it's really not. Like, it's really not in jest when I'm like, oh, why would I click a card? I guess I lose, right? When I like, sometimes I'll get impatient and I won't wait for my opponent to, like, do something before I click a card, and I'll just, like, throw out a blast from full screen and the opponent Perfect Vanishes me, and I'm like, okay, why would I click a card? And although I am making a joke out of it, it is true. You should not click a card until your opponent is doing something, because you get PV'd. That's just the way the game is. Good thing they're testing this, because, in my opinion, this is a bad change. It's just too much RPs being in mid-range with AoE green cards. Oh, is trying to say RNG. Too much RNG being in mid-range with... Yeah, this is another point, too, that I actually haven't even talked about yet. Removing Vanish for backfloating actually strengthens AoE green cards. If you were to ask me, like, what is the big... Like, what is... I don't know, I guess it would be like, name the top 5 biggest mistakes they've ever made in Legends history. I think the existence of AoE green cards would be on that list. I don't think AoE green cards should exist. And I've made this proposal before. clearly they're not going to do this at this point, but I think discontinuing the AoE green card mechanic could be really good for this game. Like, all of a sudden, they just stop making characters that have AoE green cards and they just never do it again. Kind of like how they have, like, the no switching. Like, they used to give characters no switching for 10 counts on main ability. They don't do that anymore. They just stopped doing it. I think they could do the same thing with AoE green cards. I think the mechanic is, it's too unfun, right? There's nothing inherently fun about AoE green cards, really. I mean, the person, even the person using AoE green cards, like, I don't really find too much enjoyment in using them. I think they're trying to deter people from using them. Well, not deter people from using them, but they're trying to lower the power level of them by giving more and more characters immunity, one-time immunity to AoE green cards. I think what they should do, actually, is if they're not going to discontinue the AoE green card mechanic, what they should do is they should just simply give characters permanent immunity to them, right? Why does God Goku only have one immunity to AoE greens? Why is it not every time? I think certain characters should have permanent immunity to AoE green cards. I think so. But yeah, this is a thing too, because disincentivizing people to be able to back up does actually power up AoE green cards, which I think is bad. Also, yeah, blast armor as well, because you can't back up to long range to do a blast, so blast armor is more powerful. Main focus is to get rid of perfect vanishes with a battle system change to sort of favorite aggressive play. Sure. Long range perfect vanish should simply be impossible. That would help a lot. I also think it's a little too late for them to combat passive play, since the majority of it derives from the units and their play styles. AoE green cards, blue card spam, counter cards like Super 17. I could understand this take for sure, but I don't think it's too late at all. I don't think it's ever really going to be too late, especially when you're talking about changing a core function of the battle system like perfect vanish. I think there's an argument that removing perfect vanish is probably going too far, actually, and that's why I said they're going to have to test it out. They can't just be like, all right, guys, guess what we're doing? We're removing perfect vanish, and good luck. They can't do that. Like, they would have to hold a testing season. Okay, we're removing perfect vanish. We're giving you guys 2 weeks in this PvP season to test out the change. Go do a lot of fights. We're going to be collecting data. We're going to be analyzing what's good and what's bad about the change. And then based off of the data we've collected, we're going to make adjustments next season. That's what they should do, right? It's going to be not just something that they decide, water cooler meeting. Toshi says no more perfect vanish. Let's do it. Like, that's not how this should happen. The change is fine, but I don't think backing up is a form of passive behavior half the time. I'm just trying not to get AoE green. Yeah, true. I think a better way is taking key and vanish when standing in the back and not attacking for every 5 timer counts. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've seen this proposed many times at this point. Yeah. I don't like current PvP at all because you have people being scared of units like Blue Beast Gohan, so they'll just go out of their way to desperately get a PV. In my opinion, the approach they did with LBR isn't right. Removing perfect vanishes from the game would go a long way instead. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't lose vanish going back to mid-range / neutral. By neutral, I think it just means mid-range. Other than that, it's good. Also remove perfect vanish, but that is never going to happen. Yeah, I do... It kind of is hard to imagine what the game would even feel like without perfect vanish being in the game. Like, I'm telling you guys right now, there is no bigger... I think if they removed Rising Rush from the game, that would be less impactful than removing perfect vanish from the game. I think removing perfect vanish from the game is probably the single biggest semi-realistic change they can make to the game. There is nothing that would impact the game more than that, I don't think, right now. So it is kind of hard to imagine a change like that actually being implemented, but I do think it is a necessary evil, or not even evil because most people don't like it. Tier list. Okay, what is this? We have a tier list for bad mechanics. Perfect vanish, rush, floating with UIs, doing nothing, and standing still. No wonder the game is struggling to get enough players for PvP matching. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's actually struggling for players. I mean, I would say interest in the game right now is pretty low because that's how it is every year after anniversary, but because dedicated animation for PV was important. Yeah, that was funny to me because I actually remember this specifically. I think it was the same, because they actually didn't even used to call it reveal and stuff. It used to be video and stuff. It was the video and stuff where they revealed, I believe it was Evolution Blue Vegeta, the yellow Evolution Blue Vegeta. They also talked about how they were implementing a animation for perfect vanishes. Hope you and your lag switchers have a nice bad day. Okay, we'll do a few more here. Two things. Change to only losing vanish engage when you're trying to back up further than the game allows. What does that mean? Let me read this one more time. Change to only losing vanish engage when you're trying to back up further than the game allows. That already is in the game, right? Is he talking about already being at long range and then trying to back up even more? Because that already exists, right? You already lose key and vanish for trying to do that. This makes it where people are scared to back up more, and when someone goes further, the other player will be scared to keep backing up. Remove or make perfect vanish harder to get. Making perfect vanish harder to get. I don't know if I've seen that before. Make it harder to get. Huh. So, like, reduce the window at which you would be able to actually get a perfect vanish. That could be the change. That could be it. But to be fair, then it would feel even worse if you got perfect vanish. Like, you know, it's even less of a chance of it happening, and it still happens. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that is an interesting proposal, though. Make it harder to get. In what way? In what way would they make it harder to get? Like, again, like just reduce the window which it would occur. Great idea. Unfortunately, not the best way to handle it. Without the possibility to float back even a little bit, you are prone to AoE green cards and random cards being thrown out. Yes, I think the game definitely does feel more rock paper scissory with this change. I like the idea of them trying to encourage a more aggressive playstyle, but not that excessive. Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't even feel like they're encouraging an aggressive playstyle. It just feels like they're making changes to the wrong parts of the battle system. It's perfect. However, there is one fix that can apply that the vanish decrease doesn't happen until 3 timer counts after battle starts. Many people who are trying to back off at the start of the match will get the opportunity to do so, and the rest of the match will continue as is. I disagree. I think there's nothing that differentiates the first 3 timer counts of a fight, but compared to the rest of the fight, right? The only reason why people tend to back up at the beginning of the fight is because you are better off at long range. That's the whole point. You are better off in long range because you can be more passive at long range, and you have more time to react to what your opponent is doing at long range. That's the reason. So I don't think they need to differentiate between the first 3 timer counts and the rest of the fight. I don't think this change is good. There's no point in nerfing the back float. It's essentially to be able to move freely around the playing arena. If they want to do something about passivity, it would be to nerf the perfect vanish. Yes. Minus 20 key and or a reduction in damage inflicted like you get with combo compensation. Okay, so this person is saying you can either lose key when you perfect vanish somebody, or you actually get combo compensation stacks when you initiate a perfect vanish. That's interesting. That kind of falls in line with with what someone else was talking about earlier when they said they could, like, you could get like a debuff when you perfect vanish somebody. Just from a pure game design perspective, I don't think they would do this, because perfect vanish is something that they promote. Right, there is a special animation for the mechanic for a reason. They want you to perfect vanish your opponent. And so I don't think it really fits that narrative to then give a debuff to somebody that gets a perfect vanish. I would just be more in favor of just removing it and then making adjustments to the battle system in other areas to, I guess, sort of mitigate a lot of the bad side effects that occur because of it being removed. I think is the better way to handle it. Someone else mentioned it too. Getting rid of full screen perfect vanishes is the best thing that they should do. Would make the game way more fast paced. They should also not punish you for moving to mid range from close range, as that is where the skill gap between players is highlighted. I agree. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of merit behind this. I don't disagree with this. Only having perfect vanishes occur at like mid-range and close range could definitely be a change as well. Like no perfect vanishes at long. That would help a lot. I mean, that would I think actually really help, to be honest. Like just removing it at long range, but again, they would still require testing for sure. All right, we'll do 2 more. We'll do the 2 left that are displayed here. It's a good idea in concept, but in the game, it's bad. It basically punishes you for trying to get away from an AoE green or trying to get away from a unit with blast armor to try so you can use a blast card. Maybe they should change the penalty if you just float in the back. Yeah, so I guess this would just fall in line with what people were saying earlier with maybe if you don't initiate or do anything or perform an action in like 4 or 5 counts, you start to lose key and vanish or something. That's possible, yeah. All right, last one. PvP is supposed to be where you're supposed to have fun with other people in other countries, regions, but it's not for me. It's too competitive. You can argue it's supposed to be like that, but with all the teams and characters in the game, people find a way to make it a little less fun. I'm not really sure what in reference this is to. He doesn't really mention anything about the change in my post, right? Too competitive. All right, we'll do one more. It's bad. It just restricts the fighting system and turns somewhat interesting interactions into coin flips and green cards. Yeah, I think after reading all these comments, I mean, we got through a decent amount here. Most of them, I think, were on the same wavelength as me. And we have 221 replies to this. I'm obviously not going to get to everything, but I think most people are on the same wavelength as me in saying that they don't think this change is heading in the right direction to actually curbing passive gameplay. And I think more people are on board with either removing or adjusting in some way the perfect vanish mechanic, because that is the contributor. That is the #1 contributor to passive gameplay in this game. So let me know down below what you guys think about what I said in this video. I mean, if you guys want to also leave your comments below about the prompt here. What do you think of the overall passive nature of PvP? What do you guys think of the change they're testing in LBR mode? And do you think something needs to change? Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down below, and I will see you all in the next one.